Story number 1. The Clock That Ticked Backward. In 2018, my aunt passed away and left me a few of her belongings, including an antique mantel clock that had sat on her fireplace since before I was born. It was beautiful, gold trim, dark wood, and an old wind-up key. My aunt used to say it had been in our family since the 1800s. The clock had never worked in my memory, but I took it home and set it on my bookshelf as decoration. 2 weeks later, it started ticking. At first, I was just surprised it worked at all, but then I noticed something weird. The hands were moving backward. Not fast, slowly, almost imperceptibly. I thought maybe it was just old and broken. I left it alone. That night, I had a dream of my aunt, standing in my hallway whispering something I couldn't hear. When I woke up, the clock had reset itself to 3:03 a.m. The backward ticking continued. Then I started noticing cold spots around the bookshelf. My dog refused to enter the room. She'd growl at the clock from the doorway. I once watched the second hand stop completely, and when it resumed, it jumped back 30 seconds. That same night, I heard footsteps upstairs while I was home alone. On a Monday, I woke up, got dressed, and went to work like usual. But when I arrived, everything felt off. My coworkers were repeating things they'd said the day before. My boss asked me why I was late to the same meeting I'd attended yesterday. Only when I got home did I realize the date on my phone had changed backward. It was Sunday again, and the clock was ticking loudly. I decided to wind it down, thinking that would stop it. But as I turned the key, it wouldn't resist. Instead, the gears kept winding endlessly, like I was feeding it energy. The moment I let go, every light in the house flickered. The room filled with a sudden, choking cold, and from the hallway I saw my aunt, pale and still, just watching. I took the clock outside and smashed it with a hammer. It cracked, but didn't break completely. I buried the pieces. Since then, no more backward time, no shadows, no dreams. But sometimes, just before sleep, I hear ticking in the walls.
Story number 2. The Tenant in 4B. In 2019, I moved into an old brick apartment building in Baltimore. A walk-up with creaky stairs and paper-thin walls. I was in Unit 4C. The landlord mentioned that the unit below me, 4B, was vacant, but would be filled soon. For the first few nights, it was quiet. Then, the sound started. At exactly 2 a.m., I'd hear footsteps below me, slow, pacing steps, sometimes a chair dragging, sometimes a knock on the ceiling beneath my feet. I figured maybe someone had moved in without notice. I asked the landlord. He said flatly, "No one's rented 4B yet, still empty." One evening, I came home late. As I passed the stairwell window, I glanced toward the 4B window. A man stood behind the glass, unmoving, staring upward at my unit. He was pale, bald, and his eyes seemed too wide. I rushed upstairs and called the landlord again. He agreed to check 4B with me the next day. The next morning, we unlocked 4B together. The apartment was dusty, cold, and completely empty. But here's the thing. There were footprints in the dust on the floor. Bare footprints pacing back and forth. The landlord turned pale and locked the door without saying a word. A week later, I was brushing my teeth when I saw someone standing behind me in the mirror. A tall man in a white shirt. When I turned around, no one was there. I checked the hallway, nothing. But I could smell something faint, mildew and old smoke. I started digging. With help from a friend at City Records, I found a file on the building. In 1982, a man named Harlan Price was found dead in 4B, a recluse who died alone and wasn't discovered for nearly 2 weeks. Neighbors reported smelling rot and smoke before anyone realized he was gone. My last night in that apartment, I heard a knock, not from below, but from inside my closet. When I opened it, there was nothing inside, but etched into the back wall was a message: I never left. I moved out the next day. The landlord didn't argue.
Story number 3. The field behind our house. In 2004, when I was 10, my family moved to a farmhouse in rural Iowa. Behind our backyard stretched an endless cornfield. It was beautiful until nightfall. At night, it felt like the field was breathing, like it was watching. My mom always told me not to go out there after dark. I learned why. One evening, I followed our dog, Max, who had run into the cornfield just before dusk. The deeper I went, the more it felt wrong. The air turned heavy, and I heard whispering, not voices I could understand, but like dozens of mouths murmuring just beyond sight. Then Max yelped and ran back toward the house. I followed. A few weeks later, my little brother told me he saw a boy standing in the cornfield at night, right at the edge. He waved once, then vanished into the stalks. My parents thought it was a neighbor kid, but we had none that close. One night, I looked out my window and saw a single lantern glowing deep in the field. It hovered, then flickered out. The next morning, we found strange symbols carved into the dirt behind our shed, circles with lines like crop sigils. I asked an old farmer down the road about it. He told me something I never forgot. That field's always had a pull to it. Folks go in and some don't come back. Used to be a burial ground long before we farmed it. He didn't elaborate. One stormy night, Max ran into the field again. We never found him. But 2 nights later, I saw him outside, just standing at the edge, completely still. When I ran outside, he was gone, and behind him, between the rows of corn, a figure stood watching me. Tall, thin, and faceless. We moved the following year. My parents never said it was because of the field, but we never talked about it again. Now, every few years, I look up the property online, and in some of the real estate photos, if you brighten them, you can see that figure still standing in the field.